What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a look at Onimusha Way of the Sword, the first entry to that franchise in I believe like 20 years, give or take, which caught my eye when it was initially announced. Reason being that I had actually recognized the name from watching one of my older brothers play it, but I am very freely admitting that I do not have any real experience with the franchise myself, and while we're going to go over this game and what was available in the demo, which is why I'm making this video, they released a public demo that's supposed to carry over progress for it, I simply must admit that the demo wasn't really doing it for me. That is for a few different reasons we're obviously about to get into, but in my opinion, a successful demo is something that shows off all the mechanics of the game, while also leaving you wanting to play more, and in this particular case, the demo was fine. It's roughly 30 minutes to an hour, kind of based on your own skill level, and it was released in conjunction with the announcement of the release date for this game, which is September 24th. But before we dive into specifics therein, let me first talk about the things that I didn't really enjoy so much. For starters, this demo has two different difficulties, story and action, basically easy and normal, I guess. And all of the footage you're seeing is from the action version, and honestly, the enemies are just a little too easy. Now, I can forgive some fodder enemies being forgiving in terms of an action game, and by the way, no, this is not a Souls-like, different ball game altogether, and so again, I can understand why you would want some of those basic enemies to not necessarily pressure the player that much. However, I think a lot of them are simply too lax. Like, it would be nice if they did anything, something. More often than not, they just stand there looking at you for an exceptionally long time, which makes it super easy to block, parry, dodge out of their way, that kind of thing. And so what happens throughout this demo is basically you just carving a massacre through the Ginma, the enemies here, without really any friction or anything. In fact, I hardly took damage at all on my way through the demo until I got to the boss, which serves as the sort of finale to what is playable here, and that boss took me a couple tries to figure out the timing, but then once I figured that out, that boss was a cakewalk. Even if I do think he honestly had a little too much health. Combine those issues with a demo that I think didn't actually show off all of the mechanics really, like there's stuff that the Steam page mentions that you don't seem to have access to here, like equipping charms and whatever the broader progression systems may well wind up being. And so, hopefully those are good, but I didn't really see them here. And beyond those things, the rest of it was just fine. The combat was fluid and enjoyable enough, which is the main draw, obviously, but given it's kind of a crowded market for this type of stuff these days, I think that might yet be a hard sell for people come September, especially since this is launching within like a day or two of multiple other things like Control Resonant, which is going to be a lot, I imagine. But with that stuff said, let's talk a little bit about the rest of this. I already mentioned the difficulty, so let's go ahead and talk about the story. We play as one Miyamoto Musashi, who has come into contact with an Oni gauntlet, the gauntlet on his hand that occasionally talks, albeit very rarely, at least in this demo, and is granting him powers well beyond that of a normal human being, which is allowing him to fight back against the Malice and the Ginma. The Malice, of course, being some sort of dark spiritual energy, bringing forward all sorts of problems to Kyoto, and our job is to hack and slash our way through that and all of the things it creates in its wake. So far, so standard this type of game. As we defeat these enemies, we will be collecting souls, which should allow you to strengthen abilities and things later, but didn't really come up much in the demo itself. But we do get a decent look at all of the different combat abilities. Now, the combat itself is fluid and smooth enough and enjoyable in a lot of ways. However, it's also very standard action game type of things as well, and probably won't blow you away on that front, in the sense that we have our main sword, we can perform light or heavy attacks, basically one-handed or two-handed attacks, we can dodge, we can parry, we can do perfect versions of all those things. As we do those things, it's possible to fill up a meter that then gives you like this blazing state with extra damage and the like, and performing those things well leads to you just decimating enemies, sort of instant killing them if you can run them out of stamina before it regens. But there are occasionally other slightly more interesting mechanics, like for instance, when you attack an enemy that is attacking you, you may well go into like a cross blades situation where you then have to follow up with the opposite attack that you used to initiate that. So if you go in with like a one-handed basic strike, you then have to follow that up with a two-handed attack, which will also then usually dispatch that particular enemy you were just fighting. And then in the boss fight, there's a variation of this where you have to like tap a button to sort of win the encounter, so to speak, and then you'll follow up with damage afterwards. So pretty straightforward, I suppose. But as you start destroying these enemies, they will drop various souls, which are basically stamina, health, and then later you get the blue souls, which allow you to use your armaments. We only really see one of those in the game, and it basically allows you to charge up its use, and then you can unleash like this devastating special attack once it's charged, and then that will actually force the enemies it hits to drop more health, and you can sort of just hoover all of that up mid-fight, which is one of the many ways it's more of an action game than anything else. I will also say that there were some fun little environmental actions like propping up boards and hurtling them fast-paced at various archers that might be in your way, that kind of thing, which was the only thing I saw that was akin to something like a ranged attack. And then later on there's even like carts and stuff you can push into groups of enemies, things like that. So there's a little bit of environmental reactivity I saw there via this particular demo, but how widespread that is in the full experience will be hard to say. Now, as you move through the level, you will occasionally find mirror shrines, which seems to just simply act as basic checkpoints that refill your health. They do appear to respawn enemies as well, but this is also where you'll do things like make manual saves for the game, and then the Steam page mentions you'll be able to do some other stuff at these shrines later on that we just don't really seem to see in the demo, so I can't talk about that too much because it's not simply here. And I honestly think that is just about everything noteworthy to know about the demo itself and sort of what we're expecting here gameplay wise. Now, I will say for me personally, I would need a little more challenge. Now, to be fair, I do believe these are the opening sequences, and it is very possible the game gets more difficult later on as it starts introducing potentially more stuff, and ideally with the proper progression system that should be here as well. But purely based on this demo, I would need a little more of a challenge to keep engaged here. The only thing that fought back in this demo at all was the last boss of said demo, and that boss really only took me about 3 tries to figure out and destroy. And while I can appreciate that this game is going for difficulty options and trying to make it accessible for more people, I would say I kind of feel like they need to add probably another one, like a hard difficulty in there or something, or just something that like bumps up the enemy AI and makes them a little more aggressive would go a long way even. But bringing all of this back home, like I mentioned towards the top of the video, this demo was okay. I'm probably still going to simply play and review it just because it caught my initial interest. However, I will say that I was hoping a bit more from this demo, because mostly from this I just got the impression that like this is fine, hardly a mind-blowing experience or anything like that. And then like I mentioned, because it has some serious contenders in terms of its release date as well, I think it's going to be a difficult sell with this particular one for a lot of people. But I suppose we won't have to wait too much longer until September to see how that shakes out in reality. But as for today, I do believe that is pretty much going to do it for me here. Certainly hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.